way that it sounded with this doctor was, he really played it off like it was nothing, like getting his tooth pulled out. We do 1,000 a day, it's really nothing.
When he said, we made a mistake, we never wanted this to happen, it's not what we do. I just looked at them and I felt sorry for them.
Why did that happen? It's all I really want to know.
Koropiko Mullins, born and raised in Rotorua, Ngati Pikiao, described as the international voice of sharing.
Look at her, she runs around there, she's in the zone, she's in the zone.
Mavis Paiwai from Rangitane, an inductee into the New Zealand Business Hall of Fame.
Business is fun, anyone can do it, but it's a long haul.
They met in the shearing sheds. He was a wool presser, she was a wool handler. Together they raised their 4 children and built a shearing dynasty that would take them around the world.
And look at the studio, and the gloss of the golden shears are starting to rub off on everybody. And
they're lovely, you couldn't get a better people. Mavis and Koro. They are a bit like the country. No, they're not, there's no fake cards. Oh, no fake cards.
Hard-working and hard case, the family starred in their own reality TV series, Sherbro.
He was a funny guy, but he was also very kind and considered with that humour. He was a beautiful provider, a great husband, and we were just good mates, really, really good mates.
He was my hero. He could do anything. He could fix anything. He could help me with anything.
I'd say, Dad, I want to talk to you about this. And he goes, come on, then we'll go out for tea. So we'd probably go to the RSA and have a dinner and a few beers. And I could talk to him about anything. He was someone that actually kept a good balance in our family.
One thing with Dad was, if there was any sign of trouble with his body, first thing he'd do is go to the doctor. And he always encouraged us to go there as well. Yeah, no mucking around. Just go there, get it checked out.
Yeah.
In September 2019, the Dannevirke Town Hall was full to the brim with a whanau and community in mourning. The fit, active 65-year-old was gone. And it happened during a procedure carried out thousands of times a year in Aotearoa, New Zealand. In August 2019, just back from the World Golden Shears competition in France, Koro complained of chest and back pain. His doctor sent him to the Mid-Central Emergency Department, Palmerston North Hospital, with a letter outlining his chest complaint. During the Coronial inquiry, we would hear how the doctor's referral letter wasn't entered or scanned into Koro's electronic patient file. More on that later. Koro wasn't considered high risk enough for immediate admission. He was discharged with pain relief and referred to the accelerated chest pain pathway, an outpatient program designed to speed up the diagnostics for patients with suspected cardiac risk. Koro was booked in for an exercise tolerance test on an urgent basis, but his first appointment was scheduled for almost 3 months away. So off he went to a conference in Fiji. While there, Koro became so ill, Mavis called a doctor to the resort. After arriving back to New Zealand and heading straight to the ED that day, they found out that Koro had actually had a heart attack, causing more permanent damage to his heart. On September 15, Koro was transferred to Wellington Hospital for a stent procedure, also known as an angioplasty. This non-surgical procedure involves inserting a tiny balloon to stretch open a narrow or blocked artery. Access is usually gained through an artery in the groin or wrist. Then a short mesh tube or stent, a bit like a spring, is inserted and guided into place to permanently keep the artery open and allow blood to flow freely. It's an incredibly common procedure that only requires a local anaesthetic. Evidence was heard at the inquiry that the team performs up to 7 PCI or stent procedures a day at Wellington Hospital.
They also explained that he could get bumped because he was such low risk.
Who did you think was going to perform the procedure?
So the consultant that came to see us, and I guess the way he was talking to us, we assumed that it was going to be him. In fact, the kids, as they were there talking, were on their phones Googling him to make sure he was the real deal. And of course, he certainly came up as someone that you would trust to do the procedure. It was explained to us that Wellington was a training hospital, but they won't be on the tools.
Before he was wheeled away, we done our little little
handshake
thing we do, yeah. Do the old and do the old ice, and he was flash, and so we just had a little bit of a chuckle before we went in.
They indicated that the procedure was approximately an hour. We went away to have something to eat.
The procedure began around 1 o'clock, and then something went terribly wrong. A large and fatal amount of air was injected into Koro's heart. He suffered a cardiac arrest. Resuscitation attempts were unsuccessful. At 2 o'clock, Koro was pronounced dead. The coroner was informed, and the whanau were met by 2 doctors they'd never seen before.
The young woman didn't say anything, she just stood there. The consultant just said, "We're sorry, he's gone."
Both clinicians were granted interim name suppression.
I just recall ending up on the floor, just trying to absorb what the hell had gone on.
Then he was just saying, sometimes when we put the stent in, a little bit of air can get in. With a good, strong, healthy heart, a little bit of CPR will get rid of that. Unfortunately, your dad's heart wasn't strong enough to cope. As soon as the air was in there, his blood pressure dropped, and we just weren't able to bring him back.
We were taken down to where he was laying, still in the room. Geez, and it's just this awful room.
I just whispered to Dad that it's all right and that we'll be making him proud, that we're going to hold it together. It felt really important for me to tell him that.
It was so traumatic. So traumatic.
Koro had died from what is called an acute air embolism. The family wanted to know how the air got into Koro's heart, but first they were required to answer questions themselves. Under the Coroner's Act, a health practitioner must report a death to the coroner if it occurs during or appears to be the result of a medical procedure and was medically unexpected. That triggers the police. Barely 2 hours after Koro was pronounced dead, the police arrived.
Was he okay? Did he drink a lot? Did he this? And of course it was Karina who got really angry, and she said, "It sounds like you're building a case against my dad. What's going on?" And you know, they were trying to be as gentle as possible, but in the end, Karina just said, "So who are you here for?" And they said, "Oh, well, this is for the coroner." And she said, "Well, who's here for us?"
After a debate over the wording of the death certificate, the whanau called in a lawyer who continues to represent them now.
How are things going and what information are you still waiting on?
At the end of the day, this was a patient who had air put into an artery known as the Widowmaker artery because it's so crucial. It's the main artery going into the heart with oxygenated blood. And one would hope that they would really have wanted to analyse what was going on in that theatre in greater depth.
In fact, it was significant air that entered his bloodstream.
And if you look at the literature, it's very rare for this to happen.
I'd like to know how the air got in, why the air got in.
A 2018 Cardiology Journal article described coronary air embolism as a rare complication. There are procedures and checks in place to prevent it from happening, but when it does, it's usually at the hands of clinicians who are less experienced or new in their training. A crucial piece of medical equipment during a stent procedure is a manifold, which hosts a series of clear plastic ports and taps acting a bit like a junction box in an electrical circuit. The ports connect to various tubes used throughout the procedure. They're operated both manually and automatically. 2 or 3 operators monitor the equipment to ensure everything is working and, most importantly, that air bubbles don't enter the patient.
If it was a mistake, what's in place now to ensure that this doesn't happen to anybody else?
For more than 3 years, the Mullins whanau tried to find answers around Koro's death. Countless reports and emails left them none the wiser. They'd been under the impression that it was equipment failure. But all that changed the week before they reluctantly filed into the Wellington District Court at the end of 2022.
We feel the weight and the disparity with more than 10 lawyers acting, and disappointment that we have not been able to resolve this matter. Kanohi ki te kanohi. We feel there is hope of an acceptance that Koro did not die from an equipment failure as was claimed until last week. We feel regret that this inquest consumes health dollars, health professionals' time, and wish there'd been an ability to reach some agreement on cause of death in a mediated way. That was our hope.
The coroner would find on balance that Koro's death on 16 of September 2019 was a consequence of multiple failures. More after the break. Portraits of Koropiko Mullins on display were a stark reminder of life and loss.
I'd really like to extend appreciation for the opportunity to have his photos so that we see that this is about people, this is about my husband, but our families.
Koro's images were draped with greenery.
Kawakawa is an important plant for Māori, for us. It's about strength and fortitude. And of course we have some olive branches there because we do come in peace, we come in respect, and we come looking for solutions that make our world a better world.
In the lead up to the inquiry, the coroner sought information from all parties. She also invited the whanau to submit questions they wanted answered. They did that in October 2019 and raised a concern.
They said, if anyone is going to be going overseas, please take a statement from them before they go. So they were very clearly flagging the sort of robust level of inquiry that they expected.
Coroners are like judges. They're qualified lawyers who will look into unexpected violent or suspicious deaths to find out what happened and make recommendations. They do this based on reports and statements or in a formal court hearing. Gayleen Phipps represents the Mullins Paiwai whanau.
Concurrently with that, there was also the expectation, though, that DHB would carry out its own very thorough investigation, calling in external experts if they required. And very often the coroners will rely upon that report because they are of such good quality.
10 months after Koro died, the whanau finally received the Capital Coast DHB Systems Analysis Review. It said Mr. Mullins died as a consequence of the introduction of air bubbles into the blood vessels of the heart. Then it went on to say why it happened to Mr. Mullins is not known.
So after all of that wait, there really was no answer as to how did this happen. And leading from that, there was actually no answer to the question of how do we avoid this happening again if you don't know how it happened.
A frustrated whanau instructed Galen to seek copies of statements referred to in the review.
Well, they came back and said there were no interviews, they had simply had debriefing sessions, but there's no written statements or a recording or notes taken of what was said at those meetings.
The silent young woman the family met after Koro died had performed the procedure. As first operator, she was responsible for checks to ensure there were no air bubbles. The coroner would determine that the doctor was appropriately qualified and experienced. However, not long after Koro's death, the family were advised by the DHB that the clinician was no longer employed by them and had left the country. She would later on refuse to engage with or assist the inquiry, a choice the coroner described as deeply disappointing.
The report made reference to involvement of the whanau in the investigation process that I was instructed had not taken place.
Galen was both surprised and concerned.
Over the years, I've acted for many medical professionals who have an unexpected death, and I've been involved in them preparing very thorough statements where if there has been a mistake, they own it, and they're really keen to look at how to avoid it in the future and devastated by what has happened. This is a whanau who just want to have the answers. They wouldn't want there to be a prosecution or that sort of outcome.
In a hard-hitting observation, the coroner said the Capital Coast DHB, its review panel and its clinicians were largely unhelpful, obfuscated the search for truth and served only to add to the trauma they, the family, had already suffered.
It is, as I said at the beginning, a collective responsibility, a collective opportunity to learn the lessons of the past and prevent future deaths.
The inquiry took place over 6 days, starting every morning with karakia and waiata. The coroner found a number of inadequacies, including how Koro's complaint and recent medical history was assessed, characterised and communicated when he first went to the Palmerston North Emergency Department. One witness said she was focusing on back pain when she saw Koro, but now believed his condition was a ticking time bomb and that he should have been seen sooner for follow-up tests. Another said she first learned about Koro's near collapse and chest pain worsening while preparing for the inquiry. That's when she read Koro's clinical report and his doctor's referral letter for the first time. The coroner said there was no dispute among clinicians who gave evidence to the inquiry that Koro should never have been discharged. She accepted that clinicians would not have discharged Koro into the chest pain pathway had they known the extent of cardiac under-resourcing at Mid-Central DHB at the time was such that there was no rapid chest pain clinic. This was a deformity in the acute chest pain pathway that Mid-Central DHB purported to apply, and this risked patient safety.
We would like meaningful changes that when anyone, particularly the hundreds of people who attended Koro's tangi, go to hospital for a stent, they're not lying there looking at the roof scared that what happened to him is going to happen to them. Should the coroner make recommendations to prevent others dying as Koro did, we would like any protocols to be named after Koro so that there's a focus on the person, on the patient, and this incident. We want to move on with reconciliation, compassion and humility between us all and for those who were there when Koro died.
Finally, the coroner found that the large volume of air injected into Koro's heart was due to human error. She recommended that Te Whatu Ora include in its new protocol and procedure manual a reference to the circumstances around Koro's death and how his death had motivated improved safety measures at Wellington Hospital. After the break, Mavis Mullins on why she has kept up the fight for 4 long years.
We've held off on an unveiling because it felt like this was unfinished business, and to truly give him the send-off some of the stuff needed to be completed. We needed to ensure that cause of death wasn't his fault, which is how it started to feel for us. The coronial process was challenging, but in some ways it was cathartic. To have whanau and friends turn up to make sure that we were never alone in that room, who softly sung waiata in between, different periods, to have the other parties join us for karakia. There's some sweet memories there. And every time I felt like this is just too much, can't do it, the kids would say, Dad wouldn't give up if that was you, Mum. He wouldn't, and they're right.
One of the key recommendations include any paper-based reports that patients present to the ED are included in the patient's electronic record at the time of registration. As for the accelerated chest pain pathway, Mid-Central have completed an audit of the program, and while it was designed to speed up the diagnostic process for patients, their findings suggest the system was not working as intended. Not enough doctors, not enough money, putting patients' safety at risk. The coroner called for the Mid-Central findings to be shared nationally and for all DHBs to conduct a similar audit to test expert opinion that people are not being admitted when they should be because hospitals are overstretched and are instead referred to the outpatient program. She also called for a national review to see whether the accelerated chest pain pathway program itself is fit for purpose.
The coroner has been careful, but I think astute, in bringing light to systems that don't work. The deformed services that she speaks about talks to good people having to do substandard things to meet an end goal. It becomes a difficult decision for practitioners when they have barriers put in front.
And so a coroner is much like the Waitangi Tribunal. It can make recommendations, right? How confident are you feeling that those recommendations from the coroner will be followed through?
Confidence levels aren't high, but I want this to be a positive outcome. But a system change is not an easy thing to do. I know that there's been some changes and tweaks in some of the processes, and we're grateful for that.
It's been said that Koro's story and name will be retold through, I guess, educational sort of opportunities and training. Is that some solace?
If this case could be used as a teaching tool, that sometimes little things can make huge differences in outcome, that's got to be good.
Well done, boys. Thank you.
Your whanau's a very assertive whanau, right?
Yeah.
Was that part of the reason why you continue? Because you know there's a lot of families out there that wouldn't take on the system even if they felt there's something not quite right.
There are whanau like that out there, and many of them have spoken to us. who didn't have the energy to challenge. I guess this is as much for them. If we can help make a difference and bring a voice, then we will. Yeah, it's important that we all try and step into that space, and for those that can't, hopefully we've been a bit of a beacon for them to know that, you know, we will stand, and that we stand for them as well.
We started filming the story in early 2020 as the grief-stricken Mullins whanau struggled for answers. Following the release of the coroner's findings, we asked Te Whatu Ora for a response. Te Whatu Ora apologised further to the Mullins whanau for Koro's death and the pain and suffering they've been through, admitting they could have done better. Te Whatu Ora said both Palmerston North and Wellington hospitals have implemented a number of changes, including new safety measures in Wellington named after Mr Mullins. You can read the full statement on our website. We at Te Ao with Moana want to acknowledge the grace and strength of the Mullins Paiwai whanau and their friend lawyer Gayleen Phipps, who took on a system when it would have been so much easier to walk away, and pushed for changes that will hopefully benefit all New Zealanders. Ka mau te wehi. See you next week for our final episode this season. Pō Marie.